Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Like we talked about, the NFL, maybe not officially for the regular season, but the NFL has now kicked off, so we are going to be continuing to dive into the latest headlines surrounding that. And something that has been a topic of conversation over the past couple days is the fact that Justin Herbert, the Los Angeles Chargers quarterback, is going to be missing a little bit of time here as he is dealing with an injury in his right foot. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know the exact medical analysis of it necessarily, but according to the Chargers Twitter account, the update on the injury is that doctors have recommended approximately 2 weeks in a boot, followed by a graduated return to play protocol, with the expectation that he is going to be ready for the regular season. So ultimately, not anything too devastating, but of course, especially coming off of last season and seeing what happened with Joe Burrow during that time where he was dealing with a calf injury throughout training camp, and it was very clear that it impacted him as the Bengals headed into the regular season, that he didn't have that same level of mobility, the throwing power off of that back leg. It was absolutely bothering him. So even though this isn't, a season anywhere close to a season-ending injury, there's a great chance he doesn't make any time. It's definitely a speed bump in the road, and it is disappointing. Now, Justin Herbert, I have more than enough confidence in him that he's going to be able to overcome it, but I do almost feel for him a little bit because I feel like Herbert, from a national, reputation, I feel like he's been kind of hurt over these past couple years, considering the fact that he was almost lumped into the shortcomings of the Chargers, which is fair. He is the quarterback, and you can only make excuses for so long. But I thought that the Brandon Staley experiment in Los Angeles, when they brought him in to be their head coach for the past 3 seasons, was pretty disastrous. And as much as Staley definitely does deserve a lot of the blame, I do also think that it goes beyond that as well. The past few seasons as well. I mean, Justin Herbert was the quarterback ultimately on the other side of that massive collapse in the wild card round versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, in 2023. Joe Lombardi at the time. They've now seen changes in offensive coordinators in each of the past 2 seasons. Now it's Greg Roman, formerly with the Baltimore Ravens. So I think that ultimately what I'm getting at here is Justin Herbert, even though, yes, you can always say that he could have been more responsible in helping his team win games, at the end of the day, it's not a one-man show. And Justin Herbert is a potentially elite talent that I think is sort of scratching at that conversation, but hasn't fully been able to come into the limelight in that sense, where you look at, truthers maybe like myself looking at a lot of the fourth quarter stats, the fact that he has a number of comebacks in his resume already, so a number of game-winning drives, and that it seems like all of these Chargers games are always coming down to, late in the games, that he can only do so much. And you look at the receiver wide situation as well, where in the past, Quentin Johnston obviously took a lot of heat in his rookie season after sort of disappointing there, the big drops, and I believe it was the game against the Packers specifically, and that game was just an absolute disaster for everybody basically other than Justin Herbert. But I think that, still just 26 years old, Herbert has all of the tools that you could really ask for from a quarterback. The fact that he has the mobility, he can, and the athleticism to be able to get around. He's a big build, 6'6", and he has the arm strength as well to be able to make the right plays. And I think that he is going to eventually work himself into, the top end conversations, but it's going to take, I think, the Chargers maybe a little bit of time. I think it's going to ultimately come down to some degree at least, the Chargers having some more team success, which I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case right away. And, we are going to be doing a full breakdown of the Chargers' upcoming season next Monday, so I don't want to, dive into it too much necessarily now without doing the full prep for it. But I think that there's a really good chance that this could be sort of a 2-year process to build up under Jim Harbaugh once again. That I understand that he is a great coach, and his NFL track record, as well as his college track record, has been being a winner. I don't know if he ever had a losing season when he was with San Francisco about a decade ago, but there are still a lot of raw pieces ultimately on that Chargers offense. And Justin Herbert, again, there's just really only so much that he can do at this point in his career. And, there's this narrative floating around that he's a social media quarterback, as, some people would put it. And the fact that, he's coming off of a year where he was injured and the Chargers team as a whole was kind of a mess. It just feels like this is, a time where Justin Herbert seemed like he was skyrocketing into these top-end quarterback conversations, and he's being left behind a little bit with the emergence of other young stars such as Jordan Love and CJ Stroud, even though they're really not all that much younger than him anyways. So I think that it's unfair, but that is also just the typical discourse when it comes to, stars in the NFL or really in any of the majorly covered leagues. So Justin Herbert, you look at what's around him, I would say it's ultimately a lateral move going off of an older Austin Eckler to Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, but you still don't feel great about that. There is a clear lack of a number one wide receiver at this point, where sure, you use high draft capital on Quentin Johnston, like I mentioned, and Ladd McConkey this past year's draft to try and, see if you can get anything to stick there. Joshua Palmer's a fine wide receiver. They bring in a veteran in DJ Chark. Like, I'm giving out names here, but ultimately, there's no guarantee really at that position group, I would say. And tight ends are fine, I suppose. They made some additions this offseason in Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst, but a lot of unproven on that offensive line as well. And I just don't know if he's going to have the pieces around him this season. And this is a Justin Herbert thing, but it's also just Jim Harbaugh. Like, if the Chargers don't end up having an unbelievable season this year, I think that there's no panic whatsoever that, again, the Chargers were where they were with the 5th overall pick in this past year's draft for a reason. It's because they had a lot of holes last season, and not just that, but they had a lot of really bad contracts that they had to spend a lot of the offseason sort of tinkering with, and that's why you see the release of Mike Williams, the trade of Keenan Allen, that their financial situation was a little bit of a disaster. So the Chargers, ultimately, they have a pretty easy schedule, and that is going to be something to take into consideration. Sharp Football Analysis has them at 8.5 wins. So I'll leave it at that for now. Again, I'm going to do my actual in-depth look into the Chargers' upcoming season. That'll be coming out on Monday, so be sure to tune in for that. But ultimately, I think that Justin Herbert, in regards to this injury, again, it's nothing to panic about, but I also wouldn't be in a massive rush necessarily to make sure that Justin Herbert, and it sounds so lame, it's football. No one's ever going to sort of hold out, especially after the contract that Justin Herbert was already given. That's not necessarily, it's not needed, but at the same time, I guess it's more so my idea behind this particular injury and overall with Justin Herbert, that I think you got to have a little bit of patience to fully see the vision come through. And again, maybe Jim Harbaugh is able to sort of spark some magic in year one, but A lot of turnover, both from a roster perspective and the coaching staff. So we'll be getting into all of those changes more in depth on Monday. So definitely be sure to tune into that. But another young quarterback that I think is already being set up for some criticism beyond need at this point is rookie quarterback Drake May, of course, taken 3rd overall by the Patriots. And we are now, I believe, a week, maybe less than that, into training camp. And already there are a number of national outlets that are speculating on if he is not going to be good enough, if he could end up losing his spot on the roster to Joe Milton, who they took out of Tennessee with the 6th overall pick. So I want to dive into that conversation and sort of give my thoughts on why we are really getting ahead of ourselves on that front. And we will be touching on that, but first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.